前たちは残らず倒す。ブローアップ。
Having kicked off the henshin era with numerous successful TV shows featuring transforming heroes, including Kamen Rider, Henshin Ninja Arashi, Kikaida, and Baron 1, Toei producer Toru Hiroyama put forth a radical proposal for the company's next tokusatsu hero TV series. Noting the success of the Mazinger Z TV series, which had started its broadcast in December of 1972, and realizing that the super robot boom would be the next big thing on television, he proposed a show based on a non-transforming robot hero. In partnership with Shotaro Ishinomori, who contributed designs, story ideas, and would be responsible for the manga that would eventually accompany this work, this led to the realization of a general framework for the setting and story with the working title of Robot Detective K2. Initially, the concept for the series emphasized the use of giant robots, including a proposed robot father. But as the project was iterated on, the team made the decision to focus on life-size stories and settings. This resulted in the fully baked concept and final name for Toei's new tokusatsu TV series, Robot Detective. This show would tell the story of Kei, a robot detective from the Special Sciences Police Department who has been assigned to work with detectives Shiva and Shinjo of the Metropolitan Police Department. The three of them would take on the growing threat of BAD, the robot rental agency, whose robots are being used to carry out a wide range of crimes. Robot Detective premiered on Japanese television on April 5, 1973, and would run through September 27th of that year for a total of 26 episodes. While its run wasn't a long one, this series would in time be recognized for its ahead of its time concepts, go on to influence future works, and be well regarded by enthusiasts of the genre. In some respects, we can even look back at Robot Detective, along with the Kikaida series, as predecessors to some of the programs that made up the Metal Hero series, including Metalder, Jibang, and Jam Person. So what makes Robot Detective such a memorable tokusatsu series? I believe that this can be distilled down to 4 core elements of the series. Our protagonist, Kei, the human drama that plays out across the series, the bad organization's robots, and the at times trippy and surreal visual effects. Let's explore each of these in greater detail and see how they contribute to the overall experience that is Robot Detective. Kei, a robot detective that suddenly appears in the middle of a homicide investigation, one that is challenging a 25-year veteran of the department and his partner with an impossible situation, a murder in a locked room that no one entered or exited from. Kei's demeanor, expressionless robotic face, and unconventional investigative thinking rattles his new partners. They struggle to accept Kei as a member of the team and someone they can investigate the murder with. However, what the detectives were not anticipating was that what they were dealing with would end up being the first of a new type of crime, a murderous act by a robot at the direction of and in partnership with a human accomplice. Their traditional investigative methods, assumptions about criminal intent, and ability to predict human behavior are suddenly challenged by robots with the capacity to do things that are impossible for humans, such as breaking up into smaller parts, being able to walk on the ceiling, disappearing into the environment, or transforming into a chair to blend in. This is further complicated through the partnerships these robots form with individuals who sign contracts with BAD. They get the expertise, direction, and support from their customers, which allows the robots to carry out crimes in more brazen and sophisticated ways than a normal human could. For example, episodes 5 and 6 focus on a series of jewel heists that mimic previous thefts by an individual known as Matsu the No Lock. However, Detective Shiva notes that it could not be him because his hand was amputated while in prison. What he didn't anticipate was that this criminal had teamed up with a bad robot that could easily get in and out of secure locations and could deploy the use of a 500,000 volt current to remove any obstacles in his way. Between those abilities and his human accomplice's vault-breaking expertise, they proved to be an unpredictable duo for Detective Shiva and Shinjo. They were playing an entirely new game that no longer revolved around traditional detective work, like looking for fingerprints or interrogating suspects. And even when they did find the robot suspect, they were unable to fend off these mechanical threats due to the significant difference in firepower and strength. This is where Kei comes in as both their partner and a robot detective. Kei's advanced crime-fighting technologies, enhanced deductive skills, and mechanical strength will help even the feel for the human detectives. However, despite everything that Kei brings to the table and his eagerness to work with Shiva and Shinjo, the human duo initially rejects him. They just can't accept that a robot can do their line of work. This initial tension between them and the journey of mutual discovery that unfolds as the trio work together to take down Bad make for a great character arc for Kei, who over the course of the series would earn the trust of his partners and go on multiple journeys of self-discovery to get to the bottom of who he is and what his purpose is. And it's through these struggles and Kei's growing understanding of his role in the world that he breaks through from simply being another tokusatsu hero to being a thought-provoking character. The quiet scenes in which Kei questions himself or tries more human-like ways to express his thoughts, like writing a poem in episode 4, were consistently my favorite throughout the series. His expressionless, robotic face creates a fascinating visual contrast to these moments, which force a more nuanced exploration of these at times melancholic themes. While Kei is a robot, his struggles make him very accessible as a character and add a level of depth and progression that is not always present in the typical hero of justice archetype of the henshin boom era shows. Another way in which the series breaks with the typical henshin era stories are the antagonists Kei takes on throughout the show. This brings us to the second core element that makes Robot Detective a memorable show, the human drama that is weaved throughout the series. Unlike the typical organizations of 70s tokusatsu hero shows, BAD is merely a support organization for criminals, corrupt businesses, and individuals with criminal intent in very specialized fields. BAD's modus operandi is to provide a robot that could carry out a high-stakes crime and then split half of the earnings with their partners. So for the first 20 episodes of the series, the story would typically put its focus on BAD's partners, their motivations, and backstories. This led to much more accessible stories that were generally grounded in reality and made for at times relatable antagonists. While you would not necessarily root for their success, you'd at least could understand where they were coming from, be it greed, achieving an extreme goal, or simply enriching themselves. In contrast to the more traditional, we want to take over the world motivation. These stories also had the benefit of enriching Kei's journey, as they will provide him with better insights into humanity and those things that can drive them to take action on good or bad things. Actions which coincidentally were driven by robots who, unlike Kei, were driven by the greed and darkness at the heart of the BAD organization. This brings us to the third core element that makes Robot Detective such a fun show, the BAD organization's robots. Featuring memorable designs, inventive powers and weapons, and unique personalities that further enhance the atmosphere of the series. Bat's robots make for both great enemies and a sharp contrast to the humans in the story. Within the context of the series, the Bat robots are mostly utilitarian and meant to carry out the specialized crime in each episode. But through their personalities and at times surreal way of acting, they tend to stand out as a particularly quirky element of the show, much more so than your typical monster of the week adversary. In particular, I really enjoy many of the scenes where the Bat robots are walking on the street like a typical commuter, riding in a car as a passenger, or just acting casually in what would otherwise be a normal situation, but now with a robot that is shaped like a locker room instead of a human. This brings us to the last aspect of the show that I think is critical to what makes Robot Detective a memorable tokusatsu series: the many surreal and at times trippy elements that require significant suspension of disbelief, at least much more so than your typical tokusatsu TV series. This first becomes apparent in episode 1, when during his fight against Wakaman, a giant robot appears floating in the sky, and we as viewers are left to figure out what it is and how it fits into what's happening. The reason this stands out is that up to this point, the storyline had been presented in a realistic and generally grounded fashion, but now there is a giant robot floating in the sky. Then, in episode 2, after defeating Wakaman, Kei looks at the robot in the sky and refers to it as Mother, and questions why she is shaking her head at him. As the series progresses, we continue to see Kei interact with Mother with no real explanation to what it is or what its relationship to Kei is. It would not be until episode 22 that we finally get insight into what Mother is and how it fits into the story. But the surreal nature of the show doesn't stop at the ghost-like robot floating in the sky. There are several scenes throughout the series that break from the gritty detective drama presentation style. These include scenes in which Kei is being repaired, appearances by Bat's leader as a floating kaleidoscope of light, and of course, that scene in the final episode where a lighthouse is flying through space en route to Mars while Mother is in pursuit. The combination of these things makes for a memorable TV series and characters that stand the test of time. What is unfortunate is that the storyline was clearly rushed to wrap up in the last 3 episodes. It's clear that there were plans to further flesh out the characters and world of Robot Detective, but sadly, what we ended up with was a very compressed conclusion to the story in episode 26. There is, however, an alternate take on the Robot Detective story that is less rushed and more comprehensive: the manga series that was penned by Shotaro Ishinomori and which ran for 3 months before the TV series aired and up until the last episode. The manga tells a different story from the TV series and includes more melancholy elements than the TV series. In it, Kei is a more tragic figure, and the world in which he lives is a darker one. We'll explore this manga more in depth in a future episode. More recently, Kei has appeared in other media. These include the Kikaida 00 series in Hobby Japan magazine, which ran from 1999 to 2002. Kei is also referenced through a character in the Street Fighter III Third Strike video game, Q, a mysterious trenchcoat-wearing robot who bears more than a passing resemblance to Kei. In the expansive world of tokusatsu heroes, especially those hailing from the early 1970s era, Robot Detective is a journey that is well worth taking. If you're interested in watching Robot Detective, the series is currently available through the Toei Tokusatsu World YouTube channel. Use the link in the description below to check it out.